Southeast Asia and Thai diversity. So let's begin thinking about ethnic diversity in Thailand. The ethnic majority in Thailand, the Thai people, include really a number of different groups with a common language and distinct local histories. That is, these groups have some distinctive features in terms of their own local history, but they do share a mutually intelligible language. Now, Thai groups, speakers of Thai languages, dominate the state, and you can really see them concentrated in the Chao Praia River Valley, as well as in urban centers like Bangkok. There's over 20 different Thai groups, and the largest of which are Lao groups, Thai Lao groups. Lao, the majority group for the country Laos, is also a Thai language, and there is mutual intelligibility across Thai and Lao. And they make up about 25% of the population, those Thai Lao groups. So the Chao Phraya River Valley you can see really clear in this image. And it's a really important aspect of Thai geography to understand. The Mon-speaking Varati kingdom developed in that Chao Phraya River Valley from the 6th century, about 1400 years ago. Thai speakers really moved into this area from the north, from what we think of today as southern China, and they moved into this area in the 12th century. Most of Thailand's major cities developed really along the course of the Chao Phraya River, from the north in the highlands, we'll talk about in a little bit, down to the capital of Bangkok in the south of Thailand, on the Gulf of Thailand. The Mon people are no longer dominant in the Chao Phraya River Valley. They are now a minority people. We talked about their roots right in that kingdom, their ethnogenesis in that period of the Varati kingdom. And it's a really interesting culture that really saw the crossroads of both Hindu culture to the west and the Buddhist culture as well. They saw that kind of crossroads and intermingling, right, of the Buddhist and Hindu cultures. Population of Mon people today is about 100,000, so they are a minority. And this language, unlike Thai, is related to Vietnamese. Although Mon language today, like the indigenous languages of the inland northwest, the Salishan languages that were spoken here indigenously, we also see that Mon is now endangered with the movement and mass migration of Thai people into that river valley. Many of the former Mon speakers have shifted to the dominant language of Thai. So we mentioned this northern Thailand region. It is an important region of Thailand to consider. It's a mountainous region that stretches really from Laos to Myanmar. Those northern borders include areas of the Shan Hills and the highest peak, the Doi Intanon, 8,400 feet. So also equivalent with some of the mountains that we have here in the inland northwest. For example, in the Selkirk Range, sort of equivalent here. Distinct geographical and cultural region, northern Thailand. Many different ethnic minority groups, very diverse, even though we can lump them under this notion of hill tribes, which is a category that comes from Thai speakers. And the hill tribes are quite diverse, but they include a range of different languages or language families among them as well. So we have the Karen people who speak a Sino-Tibetan language related to Chinese or Tibetan. And you may be aware that we have a significant Karen population, a refugee population here in the Spokane region. The Kyu people, also a hill tribe, but speakers of Austro-Asiatic languages like Vietnamese. And the Hmong people, which speak a language that is considered an isolate. That is, we're not very sure what other languages in the world that it is connected to. It appears to be a rather unique language. We don't understand its relationships. So a very diverse region of the country, an important one to be familiar with. One of the hill tribes that we could offer as an example are the Miem people. Miem population in Thailand is about 40,000, and they live predominantly in those northern provinces. And Mien is a language that is related to Hmong. In fact, the Hmong language that I had just mentioned is sometimes, in terms of family, referred to as Hmong Mien language family. So if you don't consider it an isolate and you see it just very closely related to regional languages like Mien, then rather than think of it as a single language, you think of it as a very, very small isolated language family, the Hmong Mien family. Very forested area. In fact, the Mien people are patrilineally organized, that is, they recognize male lines of descent for their families, and they are shifting cultivators. In fact, sometimes derogatorily referred to as slash and burn peoples. They have a unique form of subsistence that involves use of forest area. They open up an area of forest for a temporary period, and they burn off some of the vegetation cover, immediately transforming those plants into nutrients, right, for the soil. And because their horticulture, this shifting cultivation, is kind of a low scale, small scale agriculture, they don't use other sorts of inputs such as fertilizers and pesticides. And they also still maintain a hunting and gathering tradition in the forest as well. So a very rich culture in the north, and represented here by the Mien people. The worldview of the Mien is also interesting in that it's sort of syncretic. It's combining elements of a number of different religions, including an animist religion that, like we saw with the Munda, recognizes the spiritual forces of nature. Taoism, a religion that we associate with China and South China, as well as Christianity, where missionaries have had inroads into their community too. So now we've talked a little bit about the Chao Praia River Valley, kind of connecting the capital, Gulf of Thailand, right, with that northern region that we just explored of Chiang Mai and so on. And to move to the next region, we're going to think about what we would refer to as Eastern Thailand. You can see it highlighted here in the image. And that Eastern Thailand region is known as Isan, or it can also be referred to as the Korat Plateau. It is also a natural geographic feature. And this area really has been long controlled by Austroasiatic speakers. So we referred to the Mon people, and this is an area that would be traditional Mon territory, but we could also include Khmer people as well. That is, we could include this region as a traditional territory for Cambodian speakers, Khmer speakers. And in fact, we have that as late as around the 1300s, even later than the colonization of the Chao Phraya River Valley. We have within the next century the beginning of the movement of Thai speakers into this area. So an interesting geographical as well as cultural region, in that you have the interaction, right, of the Thai speakers with the Khmer and Mon local populations. There are also Lao Thai as well, Thai Lao speakers in this region. That is the ethnic majority that sort of identifies as much with Laotian culture as it is identifying with Thai culture. We talked about the Thai migrations from the south, and many scholars associate that with the breakup of something known as the Nanzhao Kingdom that was really made up of Thai and related languages like Dai or Kadai. And that kingdom, as it broke up, saw this movement of Thai speakers southwards and the establishment of the kingdom in the Chao Phraya River Valley, and then the movement up onto the plateau. There are about 1 million Cambodian or Khmer speakers in Isan. But many of these really have assimilated to Thai culture. They may be speakers of Khmer, speakers of Cambodian, but generally, in terms of their culture, they have adopted the Thai culture. So we've looked at then the eastern plateau of Thailand. We've looked at that northern mountainous region. We've looked at the Chao Praia River Valley. And we want to also include, in talking about Thai geography, would be the main Lay Peninsula. This is the extreme south of the country of Thailand. It's a mountainous peninsula, and it is separated from the Strait of Malacca from the Indonesian island of Sumatra. In fact, the Malay Peninsula's control or political control is divided between the state of Thailand and the state of Malaysia on the one hand, and then as you get to the edge of the peninsula, you have the Strait of Malacca and then the country of Indonesia. Malaysia and Indonesia all being Southeast Asian states. And this region is interesting because it has its own kind of independent history as well. There was a Malay speaking state that had been focused in this region from the 8th to 12th centuries, the Sri Vijayan state. And then it was superseded by the Patani Sultanate, an Islamic state from the 15th and 20th centuries. And so this kind of distinct history and distinct politics gives the peninsula its own really unique geographical and cultural aspects. For example, there are a range of different minority and indigenous groups that inhabit or reside on the peninsula. It's a complex population there. On the one hand, you have the third largest Malay population in the world, about 1 million Malay people. But you also have a variety of different kinds of indigenous peoples to what is now the territory of Thailand. People like the Mani, who are only numbered in about 300, and they are speakers of a Mon-related language, a language that we have mentioned, right, of the Chao Praia River Valley previous to the 12th century. And it's likely many of these groups had already shifted and assimilated to Mon language and were, in fact, speakers of other indigenous languages. In fact, you can find peoples related to the Mani to the south in areas like Malaysia and Indonesia, and some groups are also maintaining their original language. So to conclude, right, Thailand, like India, has really rich human and natural geography, very diverse, many different ethnic minority groups like the Mon, the Mien, the Mani. And for example, a good example of this is that Malay Peninsula, where there are large minority groups like Malay, right, that have population of some 1 million people.